The first time I saw him, he smiled as if he remembered my name. I still hear the sentence like a recording stuck between two frames of film. I live in a small house that has never been modernized. Wood floors that sigh in winter, a single flickering bulb over the kitchen table, an old reel-to-reel tape player that whirs like a heart when I press play. I used to find comfort in the familiar noises. The refrigerator's low drone, the neighbor's radio bleeding through thin walls. Lately, those sounds have an underside, a thin high note that makes my teeth ache and my skin prickle. There is a taste of metal at the back of my throat some mornings, like walking under thunder and tasting ozone. It began with little things that could be laughed off. A photograph on my mantle, one I had taken with my sister at the beach, came back from a friend's house with the edges darker and the white of our smiles subtly smeared, as if someone had dragged a thumb across the emulsion. I didn't think much of it until weeks later I looked closely and noticed the teeth in the photograph were slightly too long, out of place. A small, ridiculous detail that sat at the edge of my vision like a fly. Then there were the messages. Not texts, nothing digital, but paper slips folded and left under my door, or short recordings on old cassette tapes left on top of the answering machine. They were always phrases I had said aloud in the dark, the kind you tell yourself when you can't sleep. "You'll forget the light," one tape said in my own voice, slowed and warped. The first time I listened to it, I thought I had recorded myself drunkenly, but the date stamped on the box was from days before I'd said the words. Shadows changed their behavior. A shadow would fall perfectly in a corner and stay there long after the light rotated. I would pass a mirror and see a ripple of static in the glass, like television when the antenna fails. At night, the walls would breathe, soft, almost inaudible exhalations, and there were scratches behind the plaster that sounded like fingernails tracing a map I could not read. The air tasted colder in the hallways, and every wooden step I took seemed to echo a second later with a delayed matching step that wasn't mine. I began filming, at first to prove nothing was wrong with me. My phone caught nothing but normality, my own hands, my own face, but the old camcorder, the one with tape, captured different things. In one reel, as the kitchen light dies and the tape clicks, there is a blink where the frame purples, and for a heartbeat, a face fills the doorway, skin like ash, eyes that are hollows of night, and a mouth open too wide, teeth like rows of white knives. It wasn't a smile so much as an invitation. After that first reel, I told myself I was being dramatic. I rewound the tape, watched the doorway again and again until the image blurred into nothing but grain. But denial is thin when things begin to repeat. The face came back, not just on tape, but everywhere that should have been empty space. It appeared in the black puddle of a window at dusk, a slow lean in a spoon when I stirred my coffee, a smear of darkness in the glossy finish of a magazine page. Each time it was a little different. An extra tooth, a brow that didn't quite move with a muscle, but each time it wore a familiarity that made my stomach slide like ice. People mattered less as witnesses and more as props in a scene I could not stop. When I described the tapes to my sister, she laughed, then frowned, then insisted I get sleep. My neighbor shrugged and said the house had always been odd. A coworker told me I'd been distracted at work, and later, when I showed him a clipped frame on my phone, his face tightened into something like pity. Only once did anyone else flinch. An old woman at the grocery who gripped my arm and whispered, "Don't look into it when it smiles." She let go before I could ask her what she meant and walked away like a woman remembering a bad dream. She was the only interruption to a steady current of calm dismissal. The tapes grew more personal. On one cassette, my voice narrated the layout of my childhood bedroom with the slow cadence of someone reading a map. The date on the cassette read 3 days earlier than the day I had recorded it. On another, a conversation played between me and someone who answered in a pitch I did not recognize. The person in the tape laughed in that wrong, too wide way and called me by a nickname I had not used since I was a child. I watched the tape until the cassette ate itself and the plastic hissed. What terrified me was how the creature learned to be close without breaking the rules of the world. It did not always show itself outright. Sometimes it only bent reality around the edges, making clocks tick unevenly, changing the color of a sweater in a photograph, leaving a single long tooth on a plate where cookie crumbs should have been. It learned my rhythms. When I would lock the door, what radio station I preferred, which drawer I kept the spare keys in. It reproduced gestures from my life so precisely that, in a mirror, I caught my own hand moving as if it had practiced behind my back. Then there were the dreams. Soft, patient invasions. I would wake convinced I had slept through an hour, only to find evidence I had been awake. A cup of coffee still warm on the counter, a cigarette butt in the sink that I don't smoke, footprints in dust that matched my shoe size, but led to places in the house I never entered. Once I woke and found a Polaroid on my pillow. I stared at the glossy square until the image resolved. Me, asleep, mouth slack, and above my chest, just beyond my skin, a shadowed smile, stretching wider and wider. I began to fear not only being found, but being replaced. The worst proof came in a file I found buried on an old hard drive, footage from a night cam pointed at the hallway. For 20 minutes, it recorded nothing. Then, without cutting, it showed me leaving my bedroom, a slow, measured walk. I watched myself pass the camera, then watched the frame hold as if the recorder had stopped. When the image resumed 5 seconds later, I was in the kitchen, hands covered in something dark. I had no memory of getting there. The tape saved the moment as evidence and erased the witness inside me. I thought the house would protect me because it had always protected me, a geometry of walls and doors that knew my weight. I was wrong. The place where I grew up became a stage rigged with my memories as bait. The final night began with the refrigerator clicking off at midnight and never clicking back on. The bulb over the table kept breathing in and out like a lung. I set the old camcorder on a tripod in the doorway, its red eye watching my hallway the way I had once watched strangers in parking lots, clinical and desperate. I told myself I would catch it, prove it, and then make it stop. The sounds arrived first, 1,000 small scrapes like teeth against wood, a slow, deranged rattle that built into a chorus. The smell of metal rose like steam from the floorboards, copper and wet pennies, and the air in my throat grew thick. I locked every door on the house twice and held the spare key between my fingers until the metal bit into my skin. Footsteps answered my own, delayed, a mockery of my gait that moved with patient amusement. When I stepped into the hall, the camcorder recorded me taking those steps, the image grainy and honest. For 3 minutes, I watched myself move forward, and then the tape recorded something I did not feel. The air splitting as a mouth opened, the sound of 100 teeth being dragged over glass. It spoke to me using my mouth, not with my thoughts, but with my voice. It said the name my mother used when she wanted me quiet. It told me I had been lonely for years, and that being remembered meant more than being alive. It offered me a trade, the old, terrible bargain, my edges for recognition. "Let me in," it said, smiling in a sound that tasted like coal. "Take off what you think you own and let me wear it. We will be seen." I tried to refuse. I ripped tapes. I burned a stack of photographs until the house filled with the smell of scorched paper and my own breath tasted like ash. I smashed mirrors until the sound of breaking glass became a rain that never stopped. The creature adapted as quickly as I reacted, folding the charred edges into its grin. It mirrored my rage until I could not tell whether the tremor in my hands was mine or rehearsed. There was a moment, a knife-edged silence, when surrender looked like survival. I felt cold fingers, not quite fingers, slide along my jaw and trace the map of my scars. The world narrowed to the sound of its voice saying softly, "You will not be forgotten." I wanted to scream proof into the darkness, to make the camera show them the thing that had been in my doorway for months. Instead, I found myself smiling back. The next morning, the camcorder sat where I had left it, the red eye quiet. When I watched the footage, the frame held me walking down the hall, then cut. It returned to show me at the kitchen table, hands folded, a smile stretched wide and wrong across my face, too many teeth catching the light. The audio was clean, my voice calm, whispering into the lens. "Remember me." I do not know how long I have been smiling. I only know that faces I loved look at me differently now, like strangers who have learned a new name and fear to speak it. I woke up smiling.
Subscribe to Horror Story Bar.